Taking control of the car buying experience. Demand the most for your money. Here's the Car Buyer Advisor.
I'm going to start by introducing the guest on our today's show. First, with us, a regular part of this show that really is one of the reasons our show exists, services so many different vehicles in our community that probably a very high percentage of our listening audience drive. Please welcome back to our show, Tom O'Donnell with Preferred Auto Care. Tom, welcome back.
Thank you, Mitch.
Let's talk a little bit about Preferred Auto Care, what you specialize in over there, and what you work on.
Well, we're specialists on Honda, Acura, Toyota, Lexus, and Subarus, and we're family-owned and operated. Been in business for 23 years.
And really, so many people in northern Nevada drive those vehicles. This is really the only place that if you drive any of these vehicles, you should be servicing your car. Core values of integrity and quality and a commitment to doing it right. Also back on our show, probably one of the grandfather businesses in northern Nevada, if you'd say that, been around for decades as well. Rich part of our automotive community. Please welcome back to the show, Tom Hauptman with DriveLine and Gear Service. Tom, welcome back.
Good morning, Mitch.
Tell us a little bit about DriveLine and Gear Service and its history and your history with it.
DriveLine Service was opened up in 1971 as just a driveline shop because there was nobody in the industry doing drive shafts. Everyone was just playing with drive shafts. So the person I went to work for actually designed and developed the equipment for the drive shaft industry. And I went to work for him in 1978 sweeping floors, and I still sweep floors, but now I own the place. So I've been there forever.
And with multiple locations now as well.
Yes, we have a store in Fallon, 5305 Reno Highway. In Fallon, they do all drivetrain related products, including a lot of farmers, tractors, and agriculture stuff out there.
Yeah, so I think I got a look here. If this was TV, you would have seen the evil look I got by saying a grandfather business in our community, but really a rich part of our automotive community. Today we said the topic's going to be the weather change coming upon us, and there's one of the first conversations I think along that line should be prepping for winter, what things you need to know that it's time to start doing now before you have that first freeze. Again, the phone number, if you want to call in, if you have any questions about our conversation today, want to give us a call, is 775-823-1920. We'll be announcing that throughout the show. But let's start with, the overnight lows are already starting to drop. And the first snow, it seems almost inevitable right around that Halloween. I'm sure many of our parents out there are going, yeah, I've been snowed on many times on trick-or-treat night. Let's talk about what happens as the weather starts to drop, the overnight lows, and what things you need to start preparing on your vehicle before that first freeze.
Well, what you want to do is you want to make sure all your fluids are good. It's very, very important. Antifreeze is especially important. There's nothing worse than having a cooling system freeze and doing catastrophic damage. Another thing that gets overlooked too is batteries. Most of the batteries that we ever do is when there's a temperature swing, either when it goes from cold to hot or hot to cold. Well, cold's coming up around the corner, and I don't know how many people have been getting in their car in the morning to go to work and the car won't start. It's important to get that checked too.
Well, and Tom, that's Tom O'Donnell with Preferred Auto Care. We have two Toms in the studio today, so we're going to try to help you identify which one is having the conversation. Tom O'Donnell with Preferred Auto Care, you said something about the catastrophic failures of the coolant temperatures being right. Let's talk about the different parts of components in the vehicle that you can suffer catastrophic failure with if you leave water in there that's not that's going to freeze. What components is that going to cause catastrophic failure? Because it's more than one.
Oh, it's several. I mean, it could. You go to start your car up. If it's too frozen, you could spin the propeller off your water pump, bust a hole in your radiator, pop a freeze plug out.
Crack a block.
You could crack a block.
I mean, that happens even more frequently in the recreational vehicle industry, motorhomes and boats, things like that as well. Let's also talk about fuel stabilization, because this is, people are, some of these things are going to be put away now and they're going to not be used.
Well, yeah, if you have something that's going to sit a long time, you should definitely have all the fluids up to par. In other words, have everything fresh. If you're going to park a vehicle like a motorhome, put a fuel stabilizer in there, and I highly recommend you fill the tank up before it sits. When you have a full tank, there's less oxygen in there, so it's going to break down a lot slower.
Well, and the oxygen also would be room for moisture. The oxygen is hydrogen and...
Oh yeah, and you'll get moisture in the tank. If you had an eighth of a tank in your tank, the chances of getting moisture in there goes up probably 100-fold.
And that then would break down the fuel and its ability to start the car at the end of the season. And what happens when fuel sits without being stable over 6 or 8 months?
It gets really stinky. You can really tell. It would get caramelized. We've seen it before where a car sat so long that when they went to start it, the valve actually seized in the head. We had to pull it apart and do a complete valve job on it just because they used bad fuel.
And Tom, with DriveLine and Gear Service, we were just talking about this. You saw just an increase recently in the number of drivetrain failures as people were going out to the playa for the Burning Man festival out there. And you also wanted to talk a little bit about what happens this time of the year when people are going out with their four-wheel drives for the first time and engaging them, because this is a big deal. You don't use your four-wheel drive all year, and then that first time where you need that traction, you throw it into four-wheel drive, and how many times do you see that be the first time they realize that there's a failure?
Well, inevitably, our first snow of the year here in the valley, when people push the four-wheel drive button or pull the lever or whatever it may be, we get deluged with phone calls of no four-wheel drive or increased vibration, or it's preparedness. And you have to get that stuff checked. Just because you didn't use it all year, just because you think, well, I haven't used it since last year. It worked last year. Well, there's a lot of problems that can happen over the year, from just normal driving, wear and tear, electrical problems, connections, leaky transfer cases. There's just numerous things that can happen, and you're better off getting it checked before you need it, because the first time you try to go over Donner or go out on a hunting trip and you're stuck in the mud and you reach down and throw it in four-wheel drive and it doesn't work, then it's a real big problem.
Well, and hunting season is upon us too. I mean, this is all the things that start to happen, and the reason why you're deluged with, that chasing that breakdown instead of the people that would have actually, caught something before they had a catastrophic repair bill. Hunters, especially. I mean, I think if you've been in the car industry automotive industry as long as I have been, you would know that the most overlooked part of any automobile or truck today is
probably the drive shaft. To make it simple, the drivetrain in every vehicle. The only thing people think about in the drivetrain is the transmission, because everyone advertises and pushes transmission services, but differential services, transfer case services, and drive shaft inspections are very, very, very important. No one thinks about differential services. We pulled the covers off some vehicles and tar comes out instead of, gear oil. So it's very important and very, very overlooked.
Well, differentials and transfer cases. But let's get back to this drive shaft thing for a second, because we just said probably the most neglected part of an automobile. And this is, just historical. You ask any expert of the industry, and they'll almost always give, 80% of the time you're going to hear this is their opinion of the most neglected part of a car. And yet it's such a vital part of your ability to go anywhere.
Well, it turns every mile that truck goes or that vehicle goes, that drive shaft has turned thousands of times. So it's very important. And I can tell a story on myself. I went to go to the lake, this has been years ago, hooked onto my boat and pulled down the driveway, and my driveline fell out. I own the driveline shop and my driveline falls out. So is it neglected? Is it overlooked? Absolutely.
Well, and then if you really want to question if this is it, ask yourself, I'm going to ask our community right now, And if you are one of those people that actually does do this, give us a call and tell us what happened that made you be one of these people. Because usually it's an experience that actually causes you to have, the reason to do this. But when's the last time you had your drive axle inspected? Drive shaft inspected. If you can't answer that, like you can't, you know when the last time you did your oil was, but if you don't know when the last time you had your drive shaft inspected, give us a call if you have, and tell us what happened to make you do that. And let's talk about a real drive shaft inspection, because it's not just a visual.
Yes, nowadays vehicles, I would say probably 95% of all vehicles that have drive shafts, the U-joints are non-serviceable. In the old days, they used to have grease zerks in the U-joints, and you'd tell your mechanic or whoever did your service to grease your vehicle, and they would grease the U-joints. Well, now there are no grease zerks. They are lube for life, which is kind of a oxymoron. I mean, what's the life of a U-joint? It can be 50,000, it can be 150,000. But a lot of vehicles now have 150,000 plus miles on them, and the U-joints have never been changed. And will you have a problem? Eventually, yes. And is it catastrophic? Probably so. If you let that drive shaft go till it falls out, it's usually very catastrophic. I mean, not only will it leave you stranded, but it can take out fuel tanks, it can pop tires, it can take out brake lines. I mean, it can be disastrous if you let it go that long, and we see it every day. A $20 U-joint causes $1,500 worth of damage. So it's very, very important to have them checked. And the only proper way to check a U-joint is to remove the drive shaft, because the only visual way is if it's really, really bad, it's loose and clanking. If it's starting to go bad, visually you can't see that. You have to take the drive shaft out of the vehicle. You have to rotate the U-joints to see if they have catches in them, and sometimes that's not even enough. Sometimes it's more of a preventative maintenance. It's like, my truck has 150,000 miles on it, and we should put new U-joints in it. And I can't explain how effective that preventative maintenance is on a drive shaft, let alone the rest of the car.
Well, here's the thing about that maintenance right there, Tom, with DriveLine and Gear, is that if you do it, then you don't have that breakdown, but you don't realize that, maybe 4,000 miles from now, what would have happened, how much that saved you, because it almost feels like, well, I did it, but was it something that I really needed? You're absolutely right. The failure is inevitable on the U-joints. It's not if, it's when, and then how much it's going to cost. So, like you said, a little preventative maintenance there is really a big deal. And, we're going to also take this into scheduled maintenance on the entire vehicle as well. One of the things that on that drive shaft I don't want to get back to is the experience you just had before and after Burning Man with drive shafts, and the neglected ones, the ones that found out when it was too late.
Yeah. We had probably a half a dozen burners come through our shop with various problems, and we had 3 on the way to Burning Man that could have ruined their entire vacation, and we had 3 on the way home from Burning Man that they were trying their best to get home. And I would say of the 6 or 7 burner jobs that we did, I would say probably 90% of them were fixable if it was preventative maintenance, if they would have taken care of it before their trip.
Would have saved them a lot of money. You had one, I hope we won't mention names, but there was one that came through your shop that was about to have, because they were the central cargo supply carrier for a group of people that were going to be out there, and they had to get their vehicle out there or other people were not going to have supplies for a week.
Yeah,
Let's talk about that one.
This gal brought her motorhome in. She had it towed from Truckee, and we were having problems getting to it because we were very busy, and she was willing to have the tow truck driver tow her all the way to Burning Man and come back a week later and tow her all the way home, because she had 10 people out there. She was the food, the bedding, the clothes.
Lifeline.
She was the lifeline of the party. So it was pretty important. And I asked her, this thing was so bad I asked her, I says, "Hun," I says, "how loud was the radio?" I says, "Because you had to hear this, and you're still 200 miles from Burning Man." So, preventive maintenance is a big, big, big deal.
Well, Tom, with DriveLine, this is really important to have this conversation now, even though Burning Man is past. The hunting season is upon us. And Tom, with Preferred Auto Care, you also have this experience as well, that it's that time of the year where people, if they've got all this expense and all of the trips planned, and if they get out there, if they're lucky enough to get all the way out there before that failure exists, they're now sometimes so far in the remote country there isn't cell phone reception.
I can't even tell you how many times we've had people bring their vehicles in that went to go use their four-wheel drive for the first time and it didn't work. It would blow your mind. And you would think that before they go hunting that they would check all that stuff out.
Well, this is such like we said, a remote areas that we're backcountrying into, that this is a real big deal. I mean, especially drive shafts as well.
Yes, because your truck will work without a paint job. It'll work without a rear view mirror, but if the drive shaft falls out, you're walking. And northern Nevada is very, very, very critical of out there. There's a long ways to the nearest town, unless you can catch one of these wild cows and ride it back or something. I'll tell you what, it's pretty nasty out there in northern Nevada when the weather hits, or even when in the middle of the summer. It's a long way to anywhere.
Well, and then there's some of your insurance towing, or even outside concierge type will tow you, and rental car coverage contracts. They won't do the remote off the regular road. And then there's even tow truck companies that will refuse to go out into the wilderness.
Yeah, there's sometimes you're better off just leaving your truck there and cutting your losses, but you're better off to
That's littering.
Yeah, you're better off to fix your vehicle and get it ready if you're going to go out in the outback.
Getting it inspected. And back to Tom with Preferred Auto Care. You were just talking about every year you see it, and why?
Well, I don't know why, but most of the time that when we see the four-wheel drive problems, it's mostly electrical. They have switches and control units and vacuum this and moving parts, but most of the time that we see it, it's electrical causes it.
Well, let's talk about what it looks like to inspect your four-wheel drive if you just want to get out there and now, while the roads are dry, find out if your four-wheel drive is working now before that first snowfall. How would you go about that?
What I would do is I'd tell a customer, I would recommend they bring it in. And, if we're doing oil change, say, hey, can you check the four-wheel drive, see if it's working? Because some people, you can feel the difference driving it when it's in four-wheel drive, but some people can't. So you're better off just, when you get an oil change or something, say, hey, check it out.
Well, and there's different types of four-wheel drive. It's, in the old days, you had the hub turnings, and now you've got the switches, and some of them are even, there's no switches. It's all-wheel drive all the time. You wouldn't know if it is or isn't working.
Yeah, the new four-wheel drive systems are very complicated. Sometimes it's very difficult for even mechanics to figure out if the four-wheel drive system is working. I mean, you have to put it on a lift sometimes to see if there's power going to the front and rear wheels, because nowadays the front wheels sense that the rear wheels are spinning before they'll put power to them. And for the layman, for the person who doesn't know, it's very difficult to understand that. And a lot of people, it's amazing, a lot of people don't even know how to shift their four-wheel drive. To put it into four-wheel low, if you read your owner's manual, you have to have it neutral with your brake on before the motor will shift it into four low. And a lot of people do not understand that. They'll say, well, my four high is working, but my four low is not. They'll bring it in. We have to show them how and what the sequence of events has to happen to get it to shift. But knowledge is power, but you have to understand how it works before you can tell if it's working or not.
We have a caller we're going to take here, and then we're going to come back to that, Tom. Please welcome to our show, Sarah. You have a question for us? Sarah, are you there? I'll try that one more time. We have a caller. Sarah, are you still on the line with us? All right, we'll ask you to try to give us a call back in. Sorry, we just you're not there. 775-823-1920 if you have any questions. Tom with Preferred Auto Care, you had something to add to that conversation.
Well, I was just going to say, we've seen them before where we raise the car up in the air, put it in four-wheel drive, and all four wheels are moving. But what we found was you grab both the rear wheels and you can stop them. So even though it appeared the four-wheel drive was working, there was no power actually going to the rear wheels because it had a bad viscous coupling.
So, these are inspections that you can't necessarily just throw the switch and say, well, nothing made any noises, so it must be working. Because when you get out on that road and you're slipping and sliding around because you don't have all the four wheels in motion pulling your vehicle, you'll find out really quickly, and that's when it's too late and your safety is at jeopardy. Let's talk about the crabbing inspection. That's one thing that people can do even on a dry pavement.
Most of the time, most of the trucks and vehicles nowadays, if you put it in four-wheel drive and go into a big parking lot and turn a real tight corner left or a real tight corner right, we call it a figure eight, your steering wheel actually bucks. It crabs. It wants to go back and forth in your hands, but you have to be a tight turn. Now, some of them don't do that. Some of the all-wheel drives, the Sensa tracks and stuff, it's very difficult. But I would say 90% of the time you can tell if you're in four-wheel drive, you turn really sharp and your hands buck back and forth. Some people don't realize that and they say, hey, there's something wrong with my car. And it's like, no, you're in four-wheel drive. And lots of times, if a vehicle won't come out of four-wheel drive, that's a good way to tell if it's come out of four-wheel drive. If it's bucking and you put it in two-wheel drive and you're real smooth on your tight corners, then it's coming out of four-wheel drive. So.
Yeah, and basically, just to describe what that crabbing is if you were to walk in a circle, stand on your left foot and make your right foot travel around in a circle, it's going a farther distance than your left foot is. And so this is the four-wheel drive struggling for the outer wheel to keep up with the inner wheel, causing the inner wheel to slip. We do have that caller back on the line. Sarah, welcome to the Car Buyer Advisor. What question do you have for us today?
Oh, thank you. It's hard to get through to you. I don't drive very much. I only go out a couple of times a week and not very far. And I'd say I drive probably less than 3,000 miles in the course of a year. And I never know when I should have my oil changed.
Well, that's a terrific question. That's part of what our intention today is to get everybody to a point where they know what is the proper schedule for their car, because preventative maintenance is the key to saving money over the life of your car, extending the life of the vehicle, and saving catastrophic repairs. This is probably one of the best questions we'll ever get on this show, Sarah, so thank you for it. Because when you talk about scheduled maintenance, many people pick up their owner's manual and they look at the schedule, and that's often they misread or miss that one part about severe conditions, and they don't really think that Northern Nevada is necessarily severe, but it really is. And then they also are not aware of how severe short distance driving is. So Tom with Preferred Automotive, and you have done a show with us on our television about what it looks like when you start your car up, what happens to all the fuel vapors if you just go for a few miles and shut it off again.
Well, yeah, every time you have a cold start, what happens is the car's running real rich to keep it running. And when a car runs real rich, you naturally have more fuel vapors getting past the piston rings, which gets into the engine oil. Now, people that do short distance driving, such as Sarah, it's really, those are hard miles. People that drive 7,000 miles a month, those are super easy miles. So the person that's driving 3,000 miles a year, they should be changing their oil, I'd say twice a year minimum.
Yeah, minimum, or maybe even seasonally, because we have probably in Northern Nevada, if you look at your owner's manuals, they'll say scheduled maintenance and they'll say severe conditions. And if you then read the severe conditions, they talk about dust, extreme hots, extreme colds. I mean, what is Northern Nevada if it isn't dust, extreme hots, and extreme colds, and lately smoke?
The problem is they usually leave out the person that drives 3,000 miles a year. Those are the
Right.
hardest miles on a car.
They really are. It's probably the most severe driving conditions as the short distance driver, because you're right. It never allows the engine to warm up full operating temperature. You get moisture from hot and cold in the summer and the winter that breaks down like you said, the fuel going past the piston rings. It breaks down that oil, and ultimately their oil will deteriorate or decompose faster than most.
Well, we've seen it before where somebody was only driving about 1,500 miles a year, and they said, well, I'm not due for my oil change yet. Well, they brought it in after about 2,000 miles, and the car was fairly new, and the oil was almost like sludge.
And when that's happening, you're not lubricating your components properly. So really the question here is then how often should I? Look, preventative maintenance is less expensive than catastrophic repairs. Everybody knows that. And a little lesson in that is regularly changed oil is going to allow your engine to last longer. I mean, it's just theoretical probability that if you service your oil regularly, that's what's going to happen. Tom, with Preferred, let's talk about your car because you have over 300,000 miles on it. Let's talk about what kind of maintenance you do on your own vehicle.
Well, my car just turned 354,000 miles. I change the oil religiously every 3,000 miles. It still doesn't burn a drop of oil. Every 30,000 miles, I do all the fluids and tune it up.
And the owner's manual may not say that some of those are due until 90,000, but you're doing all fluids every 30,000 miles.
Well, we got to keep in mind, though, too, my car is an older car, so it doesn't use long life antifreeze. It doesn't use platinum or iridium spark plugs. So they do require, most of them are about every 30,000 miles. And, I don't keep a book on it and track of it. I just know every 30,000 miles, I just do everything because you got 30, 60, 90. It's easy to remember.
Well, and 354,000 miles. I mean, how many people out there right now can say they have 354,000 miles on their car? Tom with DriveLine and Gear. Medical probability that if you service your oil regularly, that's what's going to happen. Tom, with Preferred, let's talk about your car because you have over 300,000 miles on it. Let's talk about what kind of maintenance you do on your own vehicle.
Well, my car just turned 354,000 miles. I change the oil religiously every 3,000 miles. It still doesn't burn a drop of oil. Every 30,000 miles, I do all the fluids and tune it up.
And the owner's manual may not say that some of those are due until 90,000, but you're doing all fluids every 30,000 miles.
Well, we got to keep in mind, though, too, my car is an older car, so it doesn't use long life antifreeze. It doesn't use platinum or iridium spark plugs. So they do require, most of them are about every 30,000 miles. And, I don't keep a book on it and track of it. I just know every 30,000 miles, I just do everything because you got 30, 60, 90. It's easy to remember.
Well, and 354,000 miles. I mean, how many people out there right now can say they have 354,000 miles on their car? Tom with Drive.
So it doesn't use long life antifreeze. It doesn't use platinum or iridium spark plugs. So they do require, most of them are about every 30,000 miles. And, I don't keep a book on it and track of it. I just know every 30,000 miles, I just do everything because you got 30, 60, 90. It's easy to remember.
Well, and 354,000 miles. I mean, how many people out there right now can say they have 354,000 miles on their car? There right now can say they have 354,000 miles on their car. Tom with oil regularly, that's what's going to happen. Tom, with Preferred, let's talk about your car because you have over 300,000 miles on it. Let's talk about what kind of maintenance you do on your own vehicle.
Well, my car just turned 354,000 miles. I change the oil religiously every 3,000 miles. It still doesn't burn a drop of oil. Every 30,000 miles, I do all the fluids and tune it up.
And the owner's manual may not say that some of those are due until 90,000, but you're doing all fluids every 30,000 miles.
Well, we got to keep in mind, though, too, my car is an older car, so it doesn't use long life antifreeze. It doesn't use platinum or iridium spark plugs. So they do require, most of them are about every 30,000 miles. And, I don't keep a book on it and track of it. I just know every 30,000 miles, I just do everything because you got 30, 60, 90. It's easy to remember.
Well, and 354,000 miles. I mean, how many people out there right now can say they have 354,000 miles on their car? Tom?
Just do everything because you got 30, 60, 90. It's easy to remember.
Well, and 354,000 miles. I mean, how many people out there right now can say they have 354,000 miles on their car? Tom with DriveLine and Gear. And the owner's manual may not say that some of those are due until 90,000, but you're doing all fluids every 30,000 miles.
Well, we got to keep in mind though too. My car is an older car, so it doesn't use long life antifreeze. It doesn't use platinum or iridium spark plugs. So they do require, most of them are about every 30,000 miles. And I don't keep a book on it and track of it. I just know every 30,000 miles I just do everything because you got 30, 60, 90. It's easy to remember.
Well, and 354,000 miles. I mean, how many people out there right now can say they have 354,000 miles on their car? Tom with Drive.
So it doesn't use long life antifreeze. It doesn't use platinum or iridium spark plugs. So they do require, most of them are about every 30,000 miles. And I don't keep a book on it and track of it. I just know every 30,000 miles I just do everything because you got 30, 60, 90. It's easy to remember.
Well, and 354,000 miles. I mean, how many people out there right now can say they have 354,000 miles on their car? Tom with DriveLine.
You can look and see if you need an oil change. And any mechanic should be able to tell you, you're fine or it's looking ugly. So should be a good mechanic question for you. Say, hey, could you check the condition of my oil?
Well, and let's talk about not just the oil, but now we're talking about getting into the winter. There are inspections, different types of inspections that you can perform on your coolant as well. Let's talk about those.
Still,
Right.
those are the
Shifted into 4 low. And a lot of people do.
when you get
Is the experience
Take the dry shaft transfer case services and drive.
we had to pull it apart and do a complete.
recreational vehicle? Welcome back. So, cross members of our community have tube link cease to be able to operate in the style that they currently exist. They either have to, go face extinction or rethink their standards and start to provide goods and services worthy of your support. So on this show, what we've done is we have invited the top businesses in these industries on this show to interview them, to talk with you, so you can get to know
Your information.
Luckily, most
when you talk about grabbing is
viscous coupling.
it is or isn't working. People were not going to have
More of a lot.
almost always give failure.
Well,
Oxygen in the conversation by saying a grandfather business in our community, but really a rich part of our automotive community. Today we said the topic's going to be the weather change coming upon us, and there's one of the first conversations I think along that line should be prepping for winter. What things you need to know that it's time to start doing now before you have that first freeze. Again, the phone number, if you want to call in, if you have any questions about our conversation today, want to give us a call, is 775-823-1920. We'll be announcing that throughout the show. But let's the overnight lows are already starting to drop, and the first snow, it seems almost inevitable right around that Halloween. I'm sure many of our parents out there going, yeah, I've been snowed on many times on trick-or-treat night. Let's talk about what happens as the weather starts to drop, the overnight lows, and what things you need to start preparing on your vehicle before that first freeze.
Well, what you want to do is you want to make sure all your fluids are good. It's very, very important. Antifreeze is especially important. There's nothing worse than having a cooling system freeze and doing catastrophic damage. Another thing that gets overlooked too is batteries. Most of the batteries that we ever do is when there's a temperature swing, either when it goes from cold to hot or hot to cold. Well, cold's coming up around the corner, and I don't know how many people have been getting in their car in the morning to go to work and the car won't start. It's important to get that checked too.
Well, and Tom, that's Tom O'Donnell with Preferred Auto Care. We have two Toms in the studio today, so we're going to try to help you identify which one is having the conversation. Tom O'Donnell with Preferred Auto Care, you said something about the catastrophic failures of the coolant temperatures being right. I mean, let's talk about the different parts of components in the vehicle that you can suffer catastrophic failure with if you leave water in there that's not that's going to freeze. What components is that going to cause catastrophic failure? Because it's more than one.
Oh, it's several. I mean, it could. You go to start your car up. If it's too frozen, you could spin the propeller off your water pump, bust a hole in your radiator, pop a freeze plug out.
Crack a block.
You could crack a block.
I mean, that happens even more frequently in the recreational vehicle industry, motorhomes and boats. So let's take this on now. If she's got 3,000 miles a year, short distance driving, there's so many other parts that we want to talk about, like the differential and transfer cases in those types of vehicles, and the for the person that's severe condition driving, short distance, not really getting everything heated up, getting everything lubricated. What would we suggest? How often should they do the rest of those fluids?
Well, again, Sarah, it depends on the use of the vehicle and what type of vehicle. For example, we do a lot of four-wheel drive work at our shop, and a lot of people go to Pyramid Lake all summer long. Well, what they don't understand is, as you're towing your boat, as you're towing your trailer down the highway, your rear end creates enormous amounts of heat. If you jump under there and try and touch your differential, it'll burn your hand. Then you get to the lake, you back your boat into the water super cools the differential. It creates a vacuum and it sucks steam in your seals, your vent tubes. And every time it super cools this and sucks steam in. Well, steam turns to water. Water mixes with oil and makes gunk. It doesn't make oil anymore. So if you're a real big off-roader, stream crosser, lake goer, fisherman, jet skis, we recommend changing the fluid in a differential in a four-wheel drive once a year. Every year after your boating season, we recommend putting new oil in. Yeah. I used to be a big proponent of, you got to use the best synthetics, the absolute best oils in the world. Well, then I don't care what kind of oil or fluid you use. If you mix it with water, it still makes gunk. So now our biggest thing is service. Keep your fluids clean. And it's amazing. Some of the motors nowadays are truly million-mile motors. If you service them regularly, if you take care of them, they'll go a million miles. It's not like the old days where if you got 100,000 miles out of your motor, you've done really well. I'm not a motorhead, but Tom from Preferred can attest the Subarus and the Hondas go forever if they're taken care of. Some of the other fluids, though, transfer cases, it gets really convoluted because in the old days, it was 80-90 weight in your transfer case. They were all gear drive. It was 80-90 weight. Now there's 80-90 weight. There's AutoTrack 2 fluid. There's ATF. There's 30 weight drivetrain fluid. There's specialty fluid in some of these Hondas and Lexuses that they don't want you to change it. And there's not even a fill hole in it. They think that this is going to last forever. I'm not so sure about that, but it depends on the usage. As far as the drivetrain goes, Sarah, I think that your 25,000, 20,000 miles would probably be fine because you're not dumping your car in the lake. It's not like a motor cold starts because the differential doesn't know the difference between a cold start and a hot start. And good fluid will last a long time, but it all depends on the usage of the vehicle. Now,
Sarah, are you driving a truck or a car?
I'm driving a 2004 Jaguar.
Okay, so you're in a car, so you're not backing your rear end down into a lake, dropping a boat in. So, yeah, I'd say that the drivetrain fluid should be about every 3 years for somebody with your driving. That you should just dump the fluids and change those over as well. But again, like Tom with DriveLine and Gear said, if you're backing that boat in, I mean, I just got the visual of that cold water from Lake Tahoe hitting that hot, rear end, and then just everything, the temperature reduction so quickly and the moisture. I mean, you can just visually get the picture of what's really going on back there. Tom with Preferred.
Yeah, I think that one of the best things you should do, Sarah, is when you do get your oil changed, is have them inspect the fluids, because you're not going to know. Just have them check it. Have them check the fluid, the condition. They have little test strips for your brake fluid. One thing that does get overlooked too is power steering fluid. It does get contaminated with age.
And brake fluids too, same thing.
They have little test strips for those.
They look clear, but they could be, deteriorated inside.
And have them check your tires. Pressure's very important too. Just have them give it a good once over when you bring it in for an oil change. It really doesn't take that long.
Well, and that's the bottom line. If you're just doing, I want to be careful how I say this, because there isn't a blanket statement for anything in this industry. So just, when I share my next concern with our community, it is a overall industry concern about the place that you go and you can get an oil change in 15 minutes and at a discount price is not always the best overall reality for a consumer, because there's many times they're not going to perform these inspections. That's one thing. And then they're going to use inferior oils or filters. And here's one of the things about these types of and I want to have this conversation. We have about 5 minutes left, that we talk about what happens to an oil filter if you're using a non-OEM original equipment manufacturer or original equipment supplier oil filter, and that filter collapses inside. That yes, the filter may be warranted, but not the damage to your engine. So let's talk about scheduled maintenance and the quality of even a quality oil change.
We always say the other guys, because I don't like to name names, but if you've ever seen a bartender mix a drink, they have this wand, and the wand has 15 buttons for different drink concoctions. Well, there's a lot of the other guys that use a wand for oil changes, and they actually have a button for oil. They have a button for ATF. They have a button for antifreeze. They have a button for water. And, I don't know how many buttons are on this wand. So they can pull one wand up and hit the right button and fill up your oil. And the next one fills up your transfer case. And, well, I don't know how many times that wand is good for business, because if they hit that water button when they're trying to fill up the differential, guess what? We'll see you in no time flat. And we see it a lot.
Wow.
And, yes. And there again, as far as the quality stuff, they use bulk fluids. I mean, 55-gallon drums, 300-gallon drums of fluid. Is it as good as the rest of it? Maybe.
Likely not.
In the differential world, if you have a positive traction, you have to use an additive. Well, they say, well, our oil has additive in it. Well, I can show you a clear bottle of additive, a clear 4-ounce bottle of additive, and the last half inch on the bottom is the good stuff, is the anti-slip formula. Well, you have to shake the bottle, put it in the differential, and then fill it up with fluid. Well, any fluid that has that additive in it, in a 55-gallon drum, where is the good stuff? It's sitting on the bottom of that drum. So once it's gone, now you're getting good old 80, 90 weight gear oil with no additive. So it takes more than just, I don't know. I think truly you got to be specialized in your field to do a real great job. I mean, Tom at Preferred does his handful of cars, and he'll probably work on anything you bring him, but he's a specialist on.
He's shaking his head no. If it isn't a Honda, Toyota, Acura, Subaru, or Lexus, the answer is no.
Well,
but he's a specialist in them, and that's his field of expertise and his knowledge base for him. But
and I don't do motors. I tell people, I said, somewhere under that hood, you put oil and water in it, and sometimes I get them mixed up. So I'm a drivetrain dude. So I let the professionals on the other stuff do that.
Yeah, but what you're saying about the quality of parts is an entire another show, and it is about the conversation of inferior products being used. And look, if I'm going to advertise an oil change for $7.99, I'm going to probably use inferior oil or a reduced cost oil or a reduced cost filter. And then, of course, when I tell you, oh, by the way, do you want the premium oil? Your car calls for it because yours has an owner's manual. It needs it. And, oh, by the way, you need a more expensive filter. And they upsell you when they're there. I mean, it's just this is why our show exists. And when you go to a quality shop, and when I would talk to you, Tom, at Preferred Automotive about this, we've had this conversation with you on the air. You use quality parts and not, very, very rarely will you even go to an aftermarket part. Let's talk about that part of it.
Well, the original equipment parts is so very important. I would say probably 70% of the job is actually, to get a quality job, is the part. There's a lot of good mechanics that can do good work, mechanical work, but if you're using a sub-quality part, the job's worthless. So no, I would, parts are very important. Like on the antifreezes that we talked about, we use all genuine fluids. You have to use the right part for the car. Nowadays, the transmission fluids are all different too. You've got T4, WS, regular Honda transmission fluid. Then Nissan's got J fluid, N fluid, K fluid. It's just, you have to use the right stuff that your vehicle calls for if you expect to get a lot of miles on your car, use the right stuff.
Well, and this brings us to one final conversation in the braking system of a car. We've had this on our show before, but since it's in that scheduled part of maintenance, is having your brakes inspected. Many times when people are doing a brake job, they're told that they need to replace their calipers, and we have a problem with that on this show.
Believe it or not, most of the calipers pretty much last the life of the car. Well, mine's got 354,000 miles on it. It still has the original calipers. Some places, what they do is every brake job, they tell you they have to replace the calipers. That's ridiculous, because not only that are they replacing the calipers, but the quality of the caliper they're using is so substandard. 90% of the calipers that we ever do replace came from one of those locations.
That's Tom with Preferred Automotive, specialist in Honda, Toyota, Subaru, Acura, and Lexus, and Tom Haltman with DriveLine and Gear Service. Thanks for being with us today. Don't forget to tune in tonight at 7:30 to TCBA TV. That's the acronym for the Car Buyer Advisor Television. At 7:30 on CBS, Channel 2 here in Northern Nevada. And don't forget to give us a like on Facebook. Visit our website at thecarbuyeradvisor.com. We'll see you next Saturday at 10 a.m. sharp on CBS Sports Radio, 96.1 FM, 1270 a.m. We'll see you next week. Have a great week.